if you haven't noticed, trends are resurfacing like crazy. We had the Visco girls and their scrunchies back in 2019, then the dreaded Y2K era, with the low-rise jeans, whale tails, and tracksuits. Occasionally, we have some 70s trends sprinkled in there, go-go boots and geometric dresses. And finally, we have my favorite, the 90s claw clip, which is actually lasting longer than I predicted it would, but it'll be gone soon enough. Folks, we are living in an era of micro-trends that are moving faster than ever. Catch me if you can, your fashion is running away. It's fast. It's fast fashion. Today, let's chase after our clothing as we talk about why fast fashion is one of the most destructive industries on this planet. Next, we'll realize that fast fashion is so early 2000s. And lastly, we'll cycle in a new trend of sustainability, which this time is here to stay. If you've ever been in a Zara retail store before, you know how crazy things can get out there. And if you haven't, well, it's like an H&M, but nobody speaks English. You make your way through the labyrinth of clothes each time, shoving as much clothing as you can possibly get your hands on, only to see fitting room lines of 50+ people, each person looking like they'd be willing to murder someone just to skip the line. This past summer, my mother and I visited my very first Zara in Spain. There were only two problems. My mom didn't speak Spanish, and neither of us had working phones. Now, normally, this isn't a big deal, but in the midst of the Zara chaos, I lost my mother. Not only were my clothes running away, so was my mom. According to Business Casual, fast fashion works by following trends and quickly producing a limited amount of a store's new drop. With this production technique, stores are able to attract more customers and eliminate the need for discount sales. Because, bingo, you guessed it, the clothing is running off the racks. Stores are also able to incentivize customers into visiting the store more frequently because they'll find new items every time they come back, ultimately contributing to our culture of overconsumption on retail. However, the clothing that customers are buying is not necessarily good quality either. To keep production costs low, these stores use cheap materials that are designed to fall apart and motivate you to come back and buy more. There's a double-edged sword to this, though. You see, there's no ethical way to live in a disposable society that produces cheap clothing that quickly. Many stores have now picked up on this phenomenon, and to combat it, they are now saving the planet. Or so we think. I mean, did you honestly think that bringing in a box of old clothing to H&M just to get a 15% off coupon to purchase more was going to single-handedly beat climate change? Think again. The system is designed for you as a consumer to fail. Everywhere you go, you run into clothing that is sourced with questionable ethics, and it feels like every big corporation's environmental movement is just another greenwashing scheme to trick you into buying more stuff you didn't even need in the first place. I mean, think about it. Even if you were to purchase a crochet top from your best friend's independent business, which you know had ethical labor behind it, think about where the supplies she used came from. For all we know, the yarn she used could have come from an independent retailer that is actively fighting against what you and her stand for. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't support your best friend's independent business, because you totally should. But just to realize that there's no escaping this until we change the way the system is set up. To quote Greta Thunberg, you cannot mass-produce fashion or consume sustainably as the world is shaped today. What many people don't realize about a disposable society is how destructive it is. Most of the clothing we wear are constructed in sweatshops in third world countries where employees, including children, are underpaid for their labor. The International Labor Association estimates that 170 million children across the world are engaged in child labor. These sweatshops are known for exploiting workers by overworking them, forcing them to handle dangerous materials, and placing them in infrastructure that is not meant to hold mass amounts of people. In 2013, for example, one of the many sweatshops that European and American consumers use completely collapsed, resulting in a death toll at 134 people, with more than 1,000 out of 2,500 workers injured, many of them still trapped after the event. On top of this, the fast fashion industry is one of the leading contributors to climate change. To put this into perspective, the fast fashion industry is the second biggest water polluter on this planet. Again, I want to reemphasize how ironic it is that some of the same companies that try and sell us on how much they care about the environment, H&M, are the ones actively destroying it. That being said, much of fast fashion's pollution is also us, the consumers' fault. For example, have you ever thought to yourself, man, I own so much clothes. What if I just donate all this and buy more? I bet there's someone less fortunate than me who needs it. Well, then clearly you haven't heard of the clothing deficit myth, a term author Elizabeth Klein coined to describe the reality that there are more clothes out there than people who need them. Well, then what happens to the clothing that's not given a new home? According to the Canada Broadcasting Corporation, 85% of our donated clothes end up in landfills. Furthermore, according to CBC, a large majority of our unwanted clothes are shipped overseas to developing countries, where those clothes are then sold, and if they're not sold, they're either dumped or burned. However, many developing countries are now fighting back against textile donations. To quote Max Barak at the Washington Post, what many in the West think of as a gesture of generosity, developing countries say is preventing them from building their own apparel industries. The best way to run away from fast fashion is to understand the problem. We are all guilty of shopping from places like Sara, Gap, H&M, Shein, Forever 21, you name it. In fact, the fast fashion industry has taken over so much so that it is difficult to find somewhat ethically sourced clothing. So here's what we can do. While there's no ethical consumption under a disposable society, that doesn't just mean you should use it as an excuse to go on a shopping spree and purchase the cheapest items you can find. In almost every scenario, there are much better alternatives out there to consume sustainably. So here are some general rules that I try to follow when shopping. Number 1, thrift stores are your best friend. Never buy a blazer, button-down cardigan, or sweater firsthand. Thrift stores almost always have an abundance of those items waiting for a new home. Number 2, avoid buying patterns. No, seriously, patterns are more susceptible to going out of style, and you're more likely to get bored of them. On top of that, it's much more difficult to style patterns, so you will statistically get less use out of them. And number 3, do your research and shop local. And if you're going to buy from a chain, know your brand's environmental impact. A great way to do so is by checking out one of my favorite websites, goodonyou.eco. This platform rates brands on how they impact the planet, animals, and our fellow humans. In the end, the fast fashion industry is one of the most destructive industries on this planet. I get it. We're all human. It's okay to indulge every once in a while. To quote Dana from Parks and Rec, treat yourself. But when you treat yourself, make sure that you're making smart decisions on what you're buying. Think to yourself, does this purchase actually serve a purpose? Is this going to last me a long time? Or is this just another one of those impulse buys? The purchases we make and the people we support impact the world around us. Let's chase after our clothing once again, but this time, make sure we stay rooted in sustainability. Thank you.